Welcome to Wave Design's first video series, where we take a behind-the-scenes look at early 3D software and digital aesthetics. Now obviously we're still moving in and setting up, but we have something very exciting to show you today. This is Super3D, a Macintosh program introduced by Silicon Beach Software in 1989 that might just be one of the earliest computer graphics packages on the platform. For the time, Super3D offered a number of advanced features, things like independent light sources, color graphics, even a built-in keyframe animation system. This was all especially impressive as well, considering that Silicon Beach Software started out as a game publisher for the Macintosh. You might recognize the name from the 1986 classic Dark Castle. But as the Macintosh transitioned from a home computer to a business machine, Silicon Beach Software found more success releasing productivity applications, tools such as label makers and paint programs. And this became important as Apple introduced its Macintosh 2 line of workstations in 1987. Far removed from a home computer, these were professional business workstations with faster processors, more memory, and most importantly for the first time in a Macintosh, color graphics, making programs such as Super3D possible for the first time. For this demonstration though, we'll be using a later version of the Macintosh 2 series, the Macintosh 2SI, introduced in November 1990. This was a more entry-level version of the earlier Macintosh 2 computer, with a faster Motorola 68030 processor and built-in color video. At a retail price of around $3,600, the Macintosh 2SI compared favorably to the price tag of $8,000 or $9,000 for an equivalent computer just a few years earlier. And with our floppy disk loaded, it's time to take a tour of Super3D on the Macintosh. First thing we'll notice in the Super3D user interface is that our tools palette doesn't have any 3D shapes to get started with. Super3D expects everything to start out as a 2D shape first. So if we want something like a Vaporwave style Roman pillar, we'll draw it first using the polygon tool and create a cross section of it. Once that section is done, we can go up to our tools menu at the top and we have the option to revolve or extrude it. If we do a revolution, this section gets rotated across the axis to create a 3D shape. And there's a lot of different things that can be made this way. The Super3D manual has tons of examples and ideas for 3D models, including what might just be the oldest 3D donut tutorial. Unless somebody can find how to make a 3D donut earlier than 1989, Super3D is going to hold this record. So let's get started. It's time to make a donut. So the first thing the tutorial instructs to do is create the base of a coffee cup. And we'll do this by creating a circle in the center of the scene, and then we'll go to our tools menu and use the extrude option. This works like most 3D programs. We'll set an extrusion depth, and then when we change our view to the front view, we'll see that this circle has been turned into a 3D cylinder. Now the edge around the cup is a little bit stranger. To create that, we'll use the rectangle tool and create a rectangle that aligns with just the edge of the base. And then we're going to use the revolve tool to rotate that rectangle 360 degrees around the vertical axis. And that'll create the edge of our coffee cup. We'll use another circle shape to create the handle for the coffee cup. And then use the revolve tool once more, although this time on a different axis. Now we just need to move and rotate the handle into place. We'll use this track wheel down at the bottom to rotate the handle. This is a little bit of a weird interface. You have to remember that this was the era of the one-button Macintosh mouse. Trying to design a 3D interface around it was always a challenge. And with our handle placed, it's time to create the donut itself. We don't have a torus shape, but we can put down another circle and then move that towards the center of the axis. And then we can go into our Tools menu and do another revolve command to turn this into a three-dimensional torus. So even though we don't have the shape built in, it can be created really easily in just a couple of mouse clicks. And the last thing that we want to draw is a table to put our coffee and donut on. We'll use the polygon tool for that, and just like the Roman pillar example from before, create a cross section of our table. This one is a little fancier than the one that was in the tutorial book, but that's okay. I think it looks better. And now we can use the revolve tool one more time to create the three-dimensional version of our table. Looking nice. If we go into the view menu, we can turn on the perspective mode and actually see our scene in 3D. And there it is. All that's left is to shade and add color. Color is a little bit strange in Super 3D. We actually have a paint palette at the bottom of the application with these solid blocks of color. So if we select something like blue to start out with, our entire model gets shaded with that color. There's no real material settings or texture mapping. We can go into the model shading menu to turn on our light sources, and also select a couple of simple shading options to add highlights and diffuse lighting. We can also change the colors in our palette if we need to. For example, if we want a different shade of brown for this donut, we can go into our color wheel, lower that value, and then select it from our palette. I think one of the neatest aspects of Super 3D is how easy and intuitive it is to get started with, especially at a time when computer-generated imagery was unfriendly and super restrictive. Silicon Beach was impressively able to adapt that 80s computer graphics world into a user interface familiar to Mac users. with paint palettes and scroll wheels and drawing tools, instead of a lot of the complex terminal systems and supercomputers you would have seen at the time. It's simple, yes, but you can imagine at the time that being able to make your own 3D models and even basic animations was huge for Mac users and desktop publishers. And honestly, the limitations are rather fun in retrospect. It's fun to see what you can make out of simple 2D sketches, and the shading options, while hilariously limited, are really an aesthetic of their own. The flat shaded quality with the bright, garish colors has such a perfect 80s look to it. You could really make a fortune selling Super3D graphics now as ironic Vaporwave art and music visualizers. And I think that's also maybe the biggest disappointment with Super3D, is that it was never updated beyond this late 80s feature set and style. Silicon Beach software itself was acquired by Aldus in 1990, and Super3D's final 1991 update was largely just the same program with an Aldus branding, with all the same limitations. By the early 90s, the Mac market was already dominated by more advanced 3D programs, tools such as the Electric Image Animation System and Stratavision, all of which had features and capabilities that made Super3D more of a footnote between software generations. And let us know your thoughts on Super3D as well. Does it seem like a useful program? Do you like the 80s aesthetic? Feel free to drop a comment in the comments section, or if you're actually watching this on public access TV, send us a letter to our P.O. box at Wave Design. And be sure to check out next month when we take a look at Lightscape architectural rendering on Silicon Graphics. That's all for now.